Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Notre Dame's top 10 players heading into 2024 until this has been the team of the offseason. A lot of people really high on this Notre Dame team and stacking up these top 10 players for good reason. This is a team that not only has top end talent, but it's really, really deep as well. There are a lot of good football players that we left off this list, fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to give a massive shout out to all you guys. The amount of support y'all have shown as we've taken deep dives into all of these programs, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, for the Notre Dame fans, we left out a lot of good players. If you feel like we are sleeping on a player, let us know in the comment section. We learn a ton from you guys. We love chopping it up with you guys. And without further ado, Dill, let's get into our top 10 players, and let's start with the section that we always start with, the My Guys that we didn't necessarily put in our top 10, but certainly could be top 10 players for this Notre Dame program. And I want to start with, one of my favorite linebacker recruits I've seen in a very long time, Kingston Viliamu-Assad. And this is a guy that not only big-time upside, he comes into this Notre Dame program college ready. He's got a college ready body, massive IQ. This would be a guy, and it's hard to find linebackers that play early as true freshmen. If there's going to be a linebacker that plays early, it's going to be Kingston Viliamu-Assad.
And that's an interesting conversation I think you get into, because I'll just come out and say it. We both left off Jack Kaiser off of this list, and a guy who's played for a long time, played really solid football. You kind of look at some of the guys coming up below him with some of those ceilings, Kahanu Kia, Drake Bowen, Kingston. You got guys who are really, I think, going to be pushing Jack Kaiser for playing time. And again, Jack Kaiser, I think, is a very, very solid football player. Doesn't quite have the upside I believe some of these younger guys have, and for that reason, we left him off. But I think that goes to show how good this linebacker room can be, and frankly, how good this Notre Dame team is.
That's how you want a position group to look. Like, you want to have those high upside guys. If Kingston Viliamu-Assad emerges as a starter for Notre Dame, he's pretty damn good, because Jack Guys is a pretty darn good linebacker, I should say. And so that's how you want a position group to look. A couple other guys that I think could have breakout years. Jaden Greathouse, he was very impressive as a true freshman. Quite frankly, could fall under the category of a snub on this list. And then Jalen Sneed, another guy that I love coming out of high school, hasn't had a ton of opportunity. It sounds like the opportunity is going to present itself this year. Can he kind of take it by the horns and be that freak show linebacker rover guy that we knew he could be coming out of high school? Those are some of our breakout players, still getting into our top 10 list. And let's start with the guy that I just think is so valuable to this Notre Dame defense, Jordan Clark, coming from Arizona State. You look at Al Golden's defense, it's complicated. They do a lot of different things. To have a veteran coming in from Arizona State that's played almost 2,000 snaps during his career, I think it's massive. And Dylan, quite frankly, one of the most slept on positions in the modern day of college football is that nickel defender. You need to do so many different things playing that nickel role, whether it's being sticky in coverage, whether it's rushing the passer, being present in the run game. Jordan Clark's a guy that can do all those stuff, because we know he can do it going back to Arizona State. And I think one of the things that's encouraging is he saw a lot of good passing attacks in the Pac-12 last year. I think he's going to make that transition to Notre Dame just fine, and maybe not be a guy that's going to go top 100 in the NFL draft. But you talk about some of the most valuable players on this Notre Dame defense, I think Jordan Clark's, quite frankly, pretty damn high on that list.
And they needed to obviously add some guys, I think, to the portal, just because they were going to turn that over on. They have obviously your stars. You have your Morrison, you have your Xavier Watts, but you lose a lot of really good quality players out of that. I think Jordan Clark's a really good guy to kind of fit in, maybe bridge the gap between some of these young guys who are coming along in the recruiting class that Marcus Freeman.
Agreed. It's a young secondary. It's huge to inject a guy that's played as much as Jordan Clark has had. Going to number 9, another transfer portal addition in Chris Mitchell, coming from FIU. Notre Dame's pass catching room has come under a lot of heat over the last couple of years. Now, I think you can put some of that on the quarterback play, but I think certainly some of the wide receiver play has not been up to par, mostly in terms of hitting explosive plays. And you look at Chris Mitchell, so many different ways that he can bring explosiveness to this offense. You go back to 2023, 64 catches for over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. Still, he's a guy that can win vertically, had an average depth of target of over 14 yards, but also is a guy that's so dynamic with the football in his hands. And you look at Notre Dame, they got a lot of big-bodied wide receivers that can work vertically down the field, excel in those contested catch situations. I think Chris Mitchell fits just perfectly in this Notre Dame offense as, I'm not going to call him a gadget guy, but one of those guys that, hey, we're going to get you some swing passes, maybe some end around, some screens, get the ball in space to this guy. You got some big wide receivers that can get it done blocking in front of him. Get him involved in this offense in a lot of different ways. I think you'll find some explosive plays for this Notre Dame offense.
And I think they needed to do a little bit of that. I think you saw Jordan Faison emerge a little bit as that guy for Notre Dame late. I think he's going to have a big year, but I think you did need a little bit more of those guys who can do things and allow more creativity and, again, get the ball in their hands and make some plays, because that was something in. You kind of mentioned it. When you have your guys like Greathouse and some of these other bigger, obviously the tight end room's loaded. You have those type of guys who can just win one-on-one matchups when they need to. But I did think you wanted to add a little bit of spice, a little bit of creativity, and guys like Faison, Chris Mitchell, obviously, I think maybe give Notre Dame a little bit more of a wrinkle than it felt like.
Yeah, a little bit more juice to this offense heading into 2024. Number 8, and a guy that, though, quite frankly, I think we're too low on. You look at Riley Mills and kind of gets swept under the rug, if you will, because Howard Cross is one of the best defensive linemen in the country heading into 2024. A guy that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. You look at Riley Mills, 23 run stops, second on the team, only to Howard Cross, third on the team in quarterback hurries, a 15% pass rush win rate from the inside. That is an extremely good number from an interior defensive lineman. If you look at one reason to be really high in this Notre Dame team, there's a lot of different spots you can point to. What they're doing in the front seven, specifically on the inside of the defensive line, is probably that reason number one that I'm kind of high in Notre Dame heading into 2024.
And they're loaded there. And you talk about guys like Riley Mills, Howard Cross, even Jason Onye, guys who are so active in that defensive line spot, don't get moved around a whole lot, but really, really make a lot of tackles, are really good at getting off blocks. I love what this Notre Dame defensive line is looking like, especially on that inside. And I think your hope is, obviously, you add RJ Oben to that edge room, but some of those young guys kind of develop into really, really good players as well. I think that'll make Notre Dame a serious, serious problem for a lot of teams, because when you dominate up front, like you've seen from Michigan and Georgia in some of the past years, you're really hard to deal with.
That's the thing. Like, why do we always look at the front seven defensive line in kind of our preseason previews? It's because the teams that have the dominant defensive lines are the teams that you see have the best defenses, and quite frankly, the teams that are winning and competing for national championships. Going to our number 7 player, let's talk about one of the best tight ends in the country, Mitchell Evans. And I'll say this, if this kid comes back from the injury and looks like he did to start the season, I'm not sure how many tight ends are better than Mitchell Evans. You look at 29 catches, 422 yards. That's not necessarily going to pop out on the stat sheet, although very good numbers for a tight end. You start looking at what he provided to this Notre Dame offense. He missed a good portion of the season with injury. He still led this team in first down catches. And those 3rd and 7 situations when you need to extend drives, it was no secret where the football was going to. Mitchell Evans, big-time pass catching chops at the tight end spot, matchup nightmare for all sorts of defenders. I am extremely high on him heading into 2024.
All you have to do is go look at that Ohio State game. That game, they had no other real answers, it felt like, on offense, and everybody knew he was getting the ball. They were feeding him, and every time they needed a big play, it felt like he was making it. Again, he can run really good routes and beat guys in straight man coverage, can catch the ball in traffic. I think a really, really good savvy player getting in and out of zones and beating up that Ohio State zone, because that's kind of what they like to do. You saw Colson Loveland do it for Michigan. You saw Mitchell Evans do it. So that ability to play savvy in that Ohio State zone. And again, obviously you extrapolate to that every other team, especially if you can put together a healthy
team. Noted something that I think is really important, and that is the field, the tight end position. And sorry to cut you off there, but it's something we always talk about, like the physical traits that tight ends have. And I'm not saying Mitchell Evans doesn't have those physical traits. He certainly does. It's such a field position in terms of sitting it down in zone coverage, working the middle of the field, making yourself presentable to the quarterback. Mitchell Evans does that at such a high level. That's why he's one of the best tight ends in the country heading into 2024. Going to number 6, Dill, I was surprised you were high on him as well. Like I had Jeremiah Love up there. You had him up there. I'll give you the floor. Jeremiah Love coming into 2024. How we feeling about him?
Yeah, so for the Notre Dame fans who I think watched our Texas A&M Notre
Yeah,
Dame
they are honest.
battle, they beat me up a little bit. And then you kind of go back. It's like, okay, yeah, Audric Estime got his carries for sure and was the kind of focal point of that offense. But the opportunities Jeremiah Love got, I mean, he made the most of. You kind of go to that Clemson game, a couple of really, really nice runs, really good player, runs the ball physically. I think he's the type of guy you want for Notre Dame where I think gives you maybe a little bit more juice than Audric Estime. I think he run the ball physically, make big plays. Yeah, I'm almost I think by the end of this year, we're going to be looking at number 6. Well, that's probably a little low because I'm kind
Which
of
is crazy because we have him over guys like Riley Mills, Mitchell Evans, Dill. Notre Dame's running back room is really stinking good. A lot of casual college football fans, and I'll raise my hand and say during the early months of the winter, before I kind of dove into this Notre Dame team, I was saying, all right, you're losing Audric Estime. That's a big loss. It certainly is. They got 3 running backs that Notre Dame fans are sitting there and saying, we are very comfortable with them taking over this backfield. Jeremiah Love definitely gives you more juice. This was a guy that ran a 10.7 in the 100-meter coming out of high school. What I was most impressed with is the physicality of which he ran with. I mean, 278 yards after contact. This was a running back in high school that was kind of noted as being a burner. He put those burners on full display, but also gave you that physicality between the tackles. And when you start blending those two skill sets together, that's when you're looking at running backs that really can help you win some football games. Jeremiah Love, one of those guys. Going to number 5, let's talk about quarterback Riley Leonard. And before you talk about the stats, I just want to talk about this kid being a winner. And you all know I love Sam Hartman, right? He's a Wake Forest guy. I'm a Wake Forest guy. I got a lot of respect for Sam Hartman. You could make an argument that Sam Hartman's not necessarily a winner, right? He put up some really big time numbers at Wake Forest, but as a Wake Forest fan myself, during those big games, he just never seemed to play his best football. You kind of saw that at Notre Dame. You look at Riley Leonard, before you even talk about the physical traits and what he brings in terms of production, this dude just won so many games for a Duke team that without Riley Leonard, quite frankly, stunk out loud. And so my favorite attribute that Riley Leonard is bringing to this Notre Dame offense is a gamer. He's a winner. Then you look at what he did in 2022 before he got hurt in 2023, was one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC. Notre Dame was looking for that quarterback that could elevate them and you could win at a high level with. I think Riley Leonard has a shot at being that guy.
Yeah, people forget how good he is as a passer. I think because they watched the 2023 year, and admittedly, I think there was an element. I don't think that was his best year. I think he was obviously injured for a good chunk of it, so it was never 100%. But I mean, you go back to 22, he was really spinning it. They were putting up a lot of yards again, making everyone around him better. He was playing great quarterback that year. If they can get that in Notre Dame, I think that's huge because I think you're right. You haven't had that real alpha dog winner leader at that quarterback spot. And it seems like a really, really long time.
41% completion percentage, 20 plus yards down the field in 2022. I was surprised at that number. Like Riley Leonard can throw from the pocket. I didn't know he was that good at pushing the ball down the field. You got a lot of big bodies you can work down the field with. I think Notre Dame fans should be fired up about Riley Leonard. Going to number 4, another Duke transfer, teammate RJ Oben coming off the edge. And this is a position that I would like to see Notre Dame get a little bit more production from. That edge rusher spot. That's why they get RJ Oben. He's not necessarily the hammer in the run game. You talk about, he's solid in the run game. I don't mean to say he's a liability. Certainly not that. You look at him in 3rd and long situations when you're saying, hey, big dog, pin your ears back. You're getting after the quarterback. He's one of those edge defenders that can be that kind of guy. 14% pass rush win rate. 14 quarterback hurries, 14 and a half sacks during his career. Big time addition for this Notre Dame team.
Yeah, he was so good for that Duke team. I mean, he was part of that, like when you were looking at the turnaround, who was kind of leading it. I mean, his ability to impact games from that edge rusher position, especially going to again, when we were kind of getting back on the Duke train, it was 2022, really, really good. 2023, another very good year. Just a guy who makes a lot of plays. And I think you kind of said it. Notre Dame didn't get a ton of production. It didn't feel like, I know they tried to go to John Baptiste from Ohio State. He just wasn't like that guy. I mean, RJ Oben's a guy who, again, can really wreck games and really be dynamic. I think that was a huge gift for them.
Notre Dame knows what he can do too. Like they game plan for him against Duke. They saw what he can do. Like he can get after the passer. Going to our top 3, Dill, this was really fun conversation to get into. Let's start with Xavier Watts, and we're talking about a guy that led the country with 7 interceptions last year. You look at the most important statistics in terms of winning big football games, turnovers is one of them. Xavier Watts at a certain point, it's not a coincidence that he's in the right spot at the right time every single time to make some of these plays. When you have a safety that can give you those game-changing plays, it's invaluable for a Notre Dame team that's trying to compete in the college football playoffs where the margins are so thin. These kind of plays are going to win you games in the college football playoffs, potentially national championships. Can't undersell the meaning that Xavier Watts has to this Notre Dame defense.
Just such a smart player. I mean, you don't see guys jumping routes as consistently from that safety spot as Xavier Watts. Probably one of the best in the country at doing it.
Yeah.
That's why he's got the 7 picks. But then again, I think you go to the rest of his game. It's not like he's a one-trick pony. I mean, he can play physically. He can tackle guys in the box. He can cover guys. He's just an all-around complete safety, and his best attribute, obviously, is that important one, and that's taking the football.
I think you make a really good point. I was kind of selling the turnovers, like 59% completion percentage when targeted for a safety. Really, really good numbers. When you have safeties that can come up and play man covers, that's massive. Xavier Watts can be that guy. 14 run stops and come up and give you run support as well. They're the top 2 players on this team, and we were talking before we went live here. Kind of a similar conversation that we had with Michigan, where you got Will Johnson, Mason Graham. You're not really sure who you want to go 1 or 2. Very similar with Benjamin Morrison and Howard Cross. We end up going Howard Cross at 2. I dig into the numbers. I watched some games back. The first comment I had is, I don't know why he's not going to the NFL. Notre Dame fans certainly are not complaining about that. Howard Cross was incredible last year. I mean, 31 quarterback hurries from the inside of the defensive line is a dummy number. 13.3% pass rush win rate. Led the team in run stops. When you have an interior defensive lineman that can do the dirty work, take on double teams, let your linebackers play free, but also give you a ton of juice in the pass rush, manufacture tackles for a loss. He checks every box that you want on the inside of the defensive line. Clearly a top 5 defensive lineman heading into 2024.
And he's one of those guys nationally. I don't get how we don't talk about him.
I know.
That wasn't almost like a earth-shattering story that he wasn't going to the NFL draft, because I think you're right. In the class that, again, I don't want to say it was not a great defensive line class, especially in the interior. He probably would have been that number 1 guy. I think it would have been him and Byron Murphy plugging it out for that position. Both really, really great players. But the way he's impacting games, I mean, that 7 TFLs, 2 sacks, does not even close to do it justice. The way he was impacting, you can see those 31 hurries, the 29 run stops. I mean, just unbelievably dynamic, good at getting off blocks and wrecking games on the inside.
Number 1, Benjamin Morrison, one of the best cornerbacks in the country. We've said this for, I believe, 4 cornerbacks so far: Will Johnson, Jabbar Muhammad, Denzel Burke. I feel like we said it for one other cornerback. I'm not sure. He's in very I'm trying to think of the right
rarefied air. You're like,
that's the word, yeah.
Athletic to be able to cover guys the way he does and play the ball. There's not many who do it, and there's just not much else to say. I don't think when you see a really good cornerback, it's obvious, and frankly, you see almost none of them. He's one of them.
It's rare company. And when you have a cornerback that can take away a wide receiver 1, take away essentially half of the field, again, Al Golden's going to start and get creative. Like, you can start walking safeties in the box, giving some different pressure packages, because, hey, we know, hey, Benjamin Morrison, you're good on that boundary. And we're going to start allocating some other guys to do some different things. Massive, massive piece of this Notre Dame defense.
It allows guys like Xavier Watts to play free.
Yeah, very good point.
Watts to not have to have responsibility of needing to cheat to one side, or he can pretty much play a little bit more of that robber look, doesn't need to play deep all the time. Because, again, Benjamin Morrison, there just aren't many guys who can beat him consistently enough to warrant that type of defense.
Very good point. That'll do it. I was never low on Notre Dame. I don't know if I was the highest of people on Notre Dame. Doing this top 10 players list, like, you start to sell me on this.
The one notable thing, no offensive lineman. I don't think that's totally unfair. That's the one position I think we all get our eyes on. If they can kind of get that rolling again at a really, really – and they were playing good football last year. I want to see them get back to like 2020.
On the inside of the offensive line, that's where we're looking at. We didn't have any question marks about their tackle play last year. You have
They
to
got good young tackles coming in, so it will be about that.
And here's the kicker here. Like, you're gonna find out week 1 against Texas A&M. Like, you're going on the road to College Station to one of the best defensive lines in the country. If you can go on the road to College Station, protect up front, get a run game going, the sky's the limit for this Notre Dame team. That'll do it for the boys. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. We have a blast doing these. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.